did you understand reproductive justice before our folks, and how has this changed?
I would say before working in this space alongside y'all, I felt like reproductive spaces in general was a place that I felt anxious, that I did not belong, that I didn't feel seen as a non-binary person. I think that I had a very different understanding of what reproductive justice looks like. I was in a lot of white-dominated, women-centered spaces. I remember going to my very first reproductive justice march, and all I saw was women-centered language. So it never felt like a safe space for me. Since working alongside y'all, I think that I definitely have a very different understanding of reproductive justice. Getting to see the work that y'all have done and what I've learned through the process, I was like, okay, well, this is actually what reproductive justice is supposed to be like. One that centers BIPOC folks, one that centers and includes transgender, non-conforming, and intersex folks. I wouldn't say to this point, I still haven't yet claimed reproductive justice as a space that I belong. I feel like there's a lot of work left to be done. And I think a lot of cis folks still need to kind of take some accountability for the exclusion that they have imparted to trans and gender nonconforming folks. And I feel like for me, reproductive justice now means something a little bit more beautiful and more in alignment with how I've been able to move through the world. Working in racial justice spaces, the term reproductive justice was gifted to us by Black activists. So I feel a little bit more grounded.
There's so many other issues that I didn't really know about beforehand, like before I read and saw other folks' content that they created, like whether it's from queer and Black liberation, environmental justice, and even gun violence prevention. And because for me, I came from a film and TV background. That's what I went to school for, and so really came into this space not really knowing much about RJ, even what it meant. And I think what I only really knew about was abortion, but even that I didn't really understand fully, all the issues that surrounded abortion, besides the major narrative. And so yeah, just coming into this space just very wide-eyed and ready to learn from other people. At first it intimidated me because a lot of folks came from public health backgrounds, sociology backgrounds, but I kind of switched my perspective and just use where I was at and the experience and knowledge I brought, so it's show that what I could bring to the table in this space and how I could kind of carve that space for myself in terms of a storytelling perspective. And yeah, and I think it's just been very fruitful with each piece I created and also consumed from other folks. And I think I just went into this program just with an overall curiosity on what this space would look like and learning from other folks who have been exploring these topics for a while.
Justice to be a space that is for transgender, nonconforming, and non-binary folk. There's something about the fact that these spaces come from Black and brown folks, come from people who are like us, but we kind of get lost in the sauce, if that makes any sense. And really just kind of fighting to reclaim, at least for myself, fighting to kind of reclaim the space that I know that I belong in. I have a body, I have the capability to give birth, I occupy all of these different intersections, my communities are under attack, and we deserve safe and thriving spaces in order for our communities to grow and to build. So kind of, I think this project has kind of given me the opportunity to be able to kind of put myself back in the place where I can kind of reclaim and take up space. And that's just been a really beautiful thing to get to do.
But I think that this program has really made me intentional about making sure that this space is inclusive and reflective of the community that I belong to, the community that I see, and that we're all represented. Especially, I come from the birth work background, so especially in birth spaces and birth-breaking fields, making sure that trans and gender non-conforming people are represented and not like represented in name, but actually physically there, embodied and kept in mind while we're doing this advocacy work.
Learned about like the last two tenets of like reproductive justice, which was like prioritizing sexual autonomy and like gender liberation. And like I think it is interesting that when we think about the ways that like some of us have been like pushed out of these spaces, how we are literally embedded into what reproductive justice means and what it's supposed to stand for. And I think this program really kind of gave me the opportunity to be like, no, but like good sex is a part of reproductive justice. Sexual autonomy is a part of reproductive justice, and censoring our pleasure and censoring our joy also gets to take place here. And if we want to do like sort of movement work needs to be irresistible. Movement work needs to be appealing to masses just beyond folks who do this in our spare time, in our day-to-day. So like this program kind of gave me the opportunity to kind of be like, no, but this gets to be forefront too. So I'm thankful for that. And I just wanted to mention that. So thank you.
What piece of content did you enjoy the most, either creating or consuming?
In terms of my favorite one that I created was my last one, which was the Instagram graphic series on abortion narratives on television. One, because that's like an area that I'm very passionate about, and the TV world is something I'm know very well, but at the same time it was still very much a learning experience because I didn't know what abortion representation looked like on TV, and it was a great way for me to also like see like, yeah, what is the like mass narrative that's being put out there. And I think I kind of, as a casual viewer before this program, like I also was able to interrogate like, why don't I know so much about this issue and this movement? And a lot of it's been like, you know, a lot of the stuff I consumed when I was younger, and so yeah, like that series really helped me see also like the organizations like who are researching this work, like very specific like abortion representation on TV, and like how long they've been doing this. So that was very surprising to see, and so I was glad to be able to learn from that, but also use the Urge platform to share their work to folks. And a lot of my friends told me who are also writers themselves, told me it was very insightful for them and allowed them to think about this issue in a different way. In terms of like consuming though, and I think this kind of leads into why mine was my favorite in terms of the Instagram series, was because it was at the end of the program, so I was able to see other folks who did the content creation module and like kind of see examples. I think it was specifically Kashiba's that I looked at a lot because it was I loved that series that they did, but also it allowed me to see an example of like how to keep building on one topic across like 4 posts and like look at it in different angles each time. So shout out to Kashiba for that. And it was just really great to see everyone else's too, and see how they like the graphic design of it all. Like that was really hard for me. So seeing the way folks used like our resources to build these posts out. And yeah, I think just overall that series was my favorite just because I feel like it captured my time with Urge very well, where it was a huge learning experience, kind of challenging at times, but overall just very rewarding and just collaborative.
I think my favorite content was also the social media. And I wasn't expecting that because I really am not a fan of social media. But I had a really lot of fun building the content, and I felt like it was a nice way to like stretch like my creative bodies and connect with the community and really highlight topics that were important to me in a way that I felt like could reach a lot of different audiences and connect with the community. And another thing that I did was I interviewed a few people within my spaces as well, and I really loved that because I got to amplify their words and like see what reproductive justice looked like from their point of view. And alongside with the consuming, I really loved the writing, the blogs that everybody posted. I really went back to a lot of Ollie's work, a lot of Chloe's work. I liked just like the way that y'all had this attention to detail, and it was really enthralling. And I love like everything about it so far.
What I'm really proud of is just being able to combine topics of pop culture
music that inspires me and also has influenced my understanding of pleasure, such as like from Beyonce, Jasmine Sullivan, Baby Mother, and like just being able to analyze music lyrics and take that and kind of have a cathartic process of just processing my own like trauma within the field of like sexual health education, but then also make it fun so I can kind of communicate a topic. So I'm really proud of being able to just talk about like stigma, disparities in sexual health education, kind of talking about how we even define sexual empowerment, sex satisfaction, kind of maybe like challenging some of the societal views. So I'm really grateful to have that platform.
What medium of communication and platform were you most drawn to? Why?
Lives. That was the one I was most intimidated by, like the spokesperson module, because I was just like, what does this look like? And having like, it was like live, so it was like in the moment, and like friends were watching, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, and just creating run-up shows as well. Like, I think my other one besides one with Kashiba was like interviewing someone who's been organizing, so it was like getting those questions ready and making them very prompt and make sure we're in the time limits was something I learned. And I remember mentioning that like in a job interview later on, and they were very impressed. I'm like, oh, you know how to do a live? Like that's so beyond them. So that in itself, like because of this program, I was able to like now I have like transferable skills that I could bring to like other opportunities. And yeah, just been that I'm just glad I got to like challenge myself with that platform and learn how to use Instagram's features a bit more.
For me, but seeing some of the work that everyone else has been doing, I think it pushed me. I was like, okay, these people are stepping outside of these boxes, and I should probably try and do a little bit of that too. I will say one piece that I would love to uplift was Darcel's, I think, Instagram series on masking and COVID-19 and the pandemic. I think that echoing what Jen said earlier, sometimes like you can really just spin anything to be about RJ, because all of these justice movements are so deeply connected and embedded in each other, and we can't have RJ unless we're centering and moving from a disability justice lens.
I'm also on Twitter a lot, and I found it interesting writing threads for RJ and for the Urge account, especially for times when we were like participating with other orgs. It really forced me to think about, not just like the character limit, but just how things are visually represented. I remember one of these first ones that I did, I originally like wrote a draft, and then I actually like went on Twitter and like made a dummy account, typed it in, saw how it would show up on the screen, and that definitely affected like the edits that I made moving forward and like the types of visuals I wanted to incorporate. And I just found that like really fascinating. That's just not something I would have like considered before, just like how that would show up like on a phone versus a laptop or what have you. So yeah, I found that really interesting. And because I am a writer by trade, like I was a lot more familiar with or felt a lot more comfortable doing like the blogs or other written things. But one of the reasons I joined this program is because I wanted to be challenged in doing other types of media that I'm not as familiar with. So I really enjoyed like the visual aspects, a lot of the Instagram posts. Similarly, and especially with Instagram, like not just thinking of how visuals can support the actual messaging, but that's definitely like what you're seeing first. That's primarily what you're looking at. But also in terms of like the types of accessibility required, and as well with the images, I thought that was like a really valuable experience to have, and something that I'll like keep with me moving forward.
How will you carry what you've learned forward into your activism and advocacy?
I think through this, I've been able to kind of really like put that sort of principle of mine into practice of what accessibility really does look like. That I think I've kind of begun to adopt like a sort of like principle for myself as like vulnerability as accessibility, because I think there's something about like tapping into the parts of us that are most human, and the parts of us that kind of get to like, I don't know, the crux of who we are. Like people say all the time, like humans are, you know, naturally violent and all of these other things, but I think we're built for connection, and I think we're social creatures. So being able to kind of like tap into that through my writing was a really beautiful experience, and it's made me think a lot more about like digital accessibility. Like with the organizing that I've done, I'm working with a lot of like working class communities, a lot of folks who have 9-to-5s and kids and bills to pay. So survival is very much at the forefront. So what does it look like to try to get someone who's just worked a double to look at your post? What does that mean? What does that look like, right? And I think it's one thing to like recommend a book and be like, oh my God, you should read this. This will be like really helpful. And it's another thing to like either provide a free PDF of that book. I think it's another thing to give a community member that book, right? And thinking about what that looks like translated into online and digital spaces is something that I think this program has kind of helped me not only think about, but help put into practice. So I'll kind of be able to implement, one, the power of like the pen and writing like more so into like my advocacy, but also thinking about like, what does it look like to really be able to reach like working class Black and Brown communities in the work that we're trying to do.
I think to that point, I was at I don't remember where, but I had to do a activity where I had to think about like who my community was, and just starting out with like my innermost community, like who I interact with on a day-to-day basis the most, and then just like what communities am I part of, just in my area. And I think this has really forced me to consider, what do I consider success in organizing within my communities if my goal is for like peer education. Like, what does that mean for my parents or someone of my parents' generation versus just like my peers, or just my neighbors, like in my neighborhood. So yeah, I think it's definitely forced me to be like creative about that too. But it has been helpful to like practically sit down and consider like what can I do to affect change, at least like the little ripple of change that I can do in my area.